Welcome to When Women Preach. This podcast exists to empower AAPI and Latino women faith leaders. It was created and is hosted by Isaac, the innovative space for Asian American Christianity, where our mission is to soar beyond seminary. My name is Cris Otonari. We're also here with our co-founder and CEO of Isaac, as well as the founder of this podcast, young Lee Hertig. Our guest for this episode is Adam Hendricks. And I'm super excited to announce and spend time in conversation with Adam because he's not only a friend and an amazing pastor, but he is now my boss. So Adam, welcome so much to the podcast. We're excited to have you.
I'm so glad to be here.
Welcome, Adam. Oh my goodness. You'll have to brag about Adam. Church in Silicon Valley. Yay.
Yes. We'll just dive right into the questions, and I want to start with your connection to the arts. Sometimes you have conversations that are totally above my head, but through music, writing, your podcast on the intersection of art and faith. So can you maybe describe what are some of the values that have come out of these creative explorations? And how do they ground your commitment to centering and empowering women's voices, specifically for our purposes, AAPI women? And how does that help you ground those voices in the life of the church?
Yeah, well, I do have a podcast, but it is not as good as your podcast, and it is very dormant right now. It has not seen a true episode in years.
Don't try to recruit Cris.
Well, maybe I'll have both of you as guests that can get us started going again. But that is a good place to start because, Cris, you've met my best friend and sort of creative partner is my buddy Nuri. And when Nuri and I first met, so Nuri's parents are first generation Korean immigrants. And Nuri and I met years ago, and it was just the most unlikely pairing ever. I'm obviously a white guy from the Midwest, grew up in these small, tiny country towns. Nuri, Korean guy who grew up in the downtown Chicago and really urban places. And so the first time we met, you would have thought we would have been like oil and water, but it was the opposite. We were sort of soul brothers from the get-go. And so we do a lot of art together. And I think to your question, I think for me, art, it sounds a little cheesy, but it is a soul kind of language, It's it's said about music, it's the language of the soul. And I think all kinds of art, it's something that helps us get beyond like our external trappings and into the inner parts of our lives, our soul. And that's been such a cool thing for Nuri and I, because we look so differently. Our cultures are so different, but we're just connected deeply through art. And so, I think some values I've just learned through my love of art is that art is a way to get beyond some of these biases that people have, some of these stereotypes, and it's a way to get to the soul of a person. And I think, there's a desire for me to allow those voices to be heard through all kinds of art. And I love that the name of your podcast got me excited. I mean, Cris, you know this about me, but for me, preaching is an art form. That's why I love it. It is not just teaching. It is not just going up there and saying, reading the Bible. It is a craft. It's an art form. And so I love the idea of allowing different voices that have been silenced in the Western American church to be able to use this platform as a part of their soul to be able to let God speak through that.
That's awesome. I think you just are spared from any potentiality of becoming neurotic because you are an artist and you have an outlet. One psychologist said, if you don't have that kind of outlet, you're going to be most likely neurotic.
Well, he might be that too, but
Yeah, you could ask certain people. I'm probably neurotic at times, but yeah, you're right, and it is really cool to be able to have a pretty uh, routine outlet to be able to continually
Mm-hmm.
sort of dive back in and do some output. That's a great point.
Yep.
yeah. Well, where have you run into places of resistance when you are trying to empower women, faith leaders, and particularly AAPI women leaders, whether it's, your lead pastor now, or in any specific church context, or um, yeah, it,
Mm,
any of the areas that you have served in, and then how did you respond to that, and what happened as a result of
mm,
it?
yeah, you know, our current church, I'm so grateful for the fact that we were just talking about this before we were recording. So I preach a lot, and then our secondary preacher is our good friend Julie, and then we have another one of our main preachers is Esther, and then Chris has started preaching for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to be honest, in our current little church, I've received zero pushback at all. Everybody's just thrilled when you guys are up there, and so I'm literally knocking on wood right now. Hopefully, that continues. I think that is the value of our church right now. But yeah, I think pushback in previous context. What what I think sometimes happens is there is no intentionality to like training
Mm-hmm.
people to go forward, and so one story will not name any names or churches. But there was a great friend of mine who was, she was a great preacher, just was, in my mind, could have been an incredible campus pastor or associate pastor, or even lead pastor eventually. And when we would have open positions, she was not even considered. And the excuse that was used was like, there's no experience. But at the same time, there was no pathway, there was no training to make that happen. And so she was a youth pastor at the time. And part of what I would push back on is like she's expressed she doesn't want to be a youth pastor. She wants to be in one of these roles. Why don't we have her on a? If she doesn't have experience, that's on us as a church to help put her on that path for training, mentorship, because she's got the gifting, she's got the skills. She was incredible. It was obvious it was there, and so I think sometimes that can be used as an excuse of like that they don't have experience or whatever,
Yeah.
without intentionality of like, okay, what are we doing about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You know, there are so many amazingly gifted Asian American woman preachers with MDiv
mm,
are banned from the pulpit and even ordination track. So that's why I just didn't think we could afford to wait
mm,
until they can get in. So podcast idea popped in and
yes,
we're gonna go online then and highlight. So you're the first white male pastor ally for us that we are featuring. And my question that just popped up as I was listening to you, your congregants must be majority white, right?
mm-hmm, yeah,
And I'm grappling with how do I translate what you do in Silicon Valley with majority white folks
mm,
to AAPI, very exclusive body. I don't want to even call her body because unless you have full or representation of the parts, you are not becoming a body.
mm,
So, coming from you, what kind of insights do you offer to replicate what you do cross culturally, hiring Asian American woman pastors and having them preach from the pulpits?
Yeah.
What would you say to Asian American male pastors?
Yes. Well, yeah, I do think you're exactly right. It takes that allyship. I think it starts from the leadership. Um, and I would love to take a lot of credit, but I really can't. A lot of this was happening before I came to Highway, where the one of the previous lead pastors had recognized our our volunteers' teaching ability. And
Mm-hmm.
he was a white male as well, and he sort of called it out years ago. It
Mm-hmm.
was like, hey, you've got the gift. And so she started doing like Bible studies. I think it was helpful for him. You know, he was able to champion her. He was cheerleading her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time, it also was helpful. There were, at least, I think at the time when he started, there was our board chair was an Asian American woman as well. And so there's just so much of the leadership was sort of tied into that. Um, yeah, I think what I would say to them is, well, maybe a question first is, do you think is a lot of the hesitation that you see, is it more theological or is it more practical? What are some of the holdups in these churches?
It's interesting that you asked that question because we conducted first of its kind national survey among Asian American pastors and church leaders. There's a difference between male respondents and female respondents. The male respondents said it's biblical. It's unbiblical to hire a woman or
Hmm.
ordain woman. Whereas AAPI woman responders said, we haven't seen any of our representative, no exemplars. And so that was most of the women's answer. And
Mm-hmm.
look at this catch 22. It's biblically incorrect, so they don't, show women preaching. And then women are saying, we haven't seen one.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, it is a catch-22.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for me, a lot of my theological background, I did grow up very conservative Christian, and um, but I just had this glimmer of hope. Chris, I don't even think you and I have talked about this before, but I grew up. My grandma was she would preach in the Methodist church. She was she was never like a permanent position, but she did some interim
Mm-hmm.
pastorships, and so I was in this very fundamentalist complementarian space. But then we'd go on occasion, and I watched my grandma preach, and um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really interesting. I was just thinking about this recently of like how that informed me theologically, because I did have this construct, but then I saw it in practice, and I was like, that sort of overwhelmed some of the things I had been taught, because I was like, this is my
Mm-hmm.
grandma, who I know is
Yeah.
firmly following Jesus, and she is gifted to do this. She was a very outspoken and powerful woman. Um, so, yeah, I definitely don't have the answer for sure, but it's like we have to allow what we see out of actual humans to inform how we see the Bible as well, I think.
Wow. That's powerful. Mm.
Yeah, so in a
Nah.
way, you did have that exemplar in your
Mm-hmm.
grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah, and I haven't really put that together until recently. Of like, oh yeah, it's pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
It never even struck me like why a female couldn't preach the word.
I
Mm.
get it now. That explains.
It does. Right.
So let's mobilize, Chris, all the grandmothers.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
spunky ones, especially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Official invitation, Young, for you to come preach Highway. We'd love to have you come preach. That'd be awesome.
I'll
Oh,
be
yeah,
there in May.
just doing.
Yeah.
I think what I'm thinking of is I have never really been a part of an Asian immigrant or Asian American church. And so I only pretty much know the kind of a white dominant space. So I haven't personally run into kind of that biblical grounding that you were talking about from that survey. But I still feel like it exists. It just looks different. Even in churches that are egalitarian and by doctrine, that there are still some barriers, I feel like, for women in leadership. And I think, in one case, I remember one of the churches I was at previously where when the white male pastor was not preaching, like men would complain. And so it was very refreshing for me to hear that you haven't gotten any pushback from the three of us Asian American females preaching. That feels pretty great. And like a testament, I think, to the journey that Highway has been on in particular, because Highway was not always egalitarian, at least in writing. And so that's been a journey, but to hear how white male pastors have empowered women along the way, that's your testament. I think that's kind of part of the answer. Yeah. I'm wondering if you had to deconstruct a little bit after, your upbringing and then watching your grandmother and now being in a context where you're very empowering of women.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, I think what we just talked about was great is like in my bones, I think I had a deeper understanding. But yeah, when you're, I was Southern Baptist for all of my upbringing, and more obviously has gotten a lot of publicity in the past few years for taking on that denomination. But yeah, there was just this like take it be on the word of what other people had told me. But yeah, I think for me, like a lot of people in college, there was just a deconstruction, and I will say it happened pretty early for me though. I went, I have some church baggage like everybody, but most of the churches I've been to didn't just espouse egalitarian views, but they would highlight women preachers. So pretty early on, I was able to connect those dots. But I do think what you're saying, Cris, is exactly right. There are a lot of there are the subtle, more microaggression type things of like complaining. And then you're also right. Like if anything, I truly, this is not a joke. It's going to sound like it's self-deprecating humor, but I've had people at Highway who are like, "Hey, you're preaching a little too much. We want to hear from Esther." So I'm like, okay. So it's like, all right. So yeah, I'm just so grateful. A lot of that was still before I came on, and I know I think you and me both, Cris, it's like that was part of the draw to this community. We say this a lot. It's a pretty unique situation, and I'm aware of that, and I do, I do hope that this can be something that we can help spread to other congregations. Of like, it is possible to be different. You don't have to follow some of the paths of these other groups.
You know what, Adam? Our championing of gender equality at the pulpit is not just gender equality. There's an equity issue. So there are two different cases. One Pastor Alap, former participant, alumna, wrote a piece. When churches give ample opportunity for Asian American women to work and volunteer, even though she went to seminary and has MDiv degree, but you work for free. So she had to, on top of doing all the work, she also had to get a day job, which leads her to burnout, total burnout, or bar women from doing what they are equipped to do. So gender equality and equity issue, they are two sides of one coin. So that's what I see that we need to change. Churches owe women back pay.
Yeah, right. Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah, that's very powerful.
it is. So they are suffering in that way as well.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It means you need to give Esther a raise,
Yeah, I'll double her pay.
our volunteer preacher.
And this may sound controversial, but still, mission is defined going across the ocean on the plane. America is a mission field, is what I declare. And so, what we do at Isaac is not considered as mission of the church.
Mm.
So it's an uphill, climbing, but, we'll do what we can.
Yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
I couldn't agree more. That's how I would define mission as well.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
just to give some, positive notes, as we've been doing Pastoral Lab in the last 5 years, Asian American male pastors knock on my door and said, "Do you have program for men's?" And around that time, God made it possible that we got sub-grant. So we are running that program as well. And it's a mixed gender program, Thriving Congregation Initiative for Asian American pastoral leaders.
Mhm.
And Cris said our mission is soar beyond the seminary. And as a former seminary faculty, I design programs that I wish I had learned when I was at seminary. So I designed a program that also includes fund development, finance 101, conflict mediation, you name it, and institutional intelligence.
Hmm.
So we are filling the knowledge gap, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's incredible to hear. I didn't know all of that. And I do think it speaks to what we were saying earlier of like, you guys are doing the work of investing in these leaders because you're filling in the gap of churches and other organizations that have not done that work of investments and that work of training and mentoring.
Yeah.
That's
It'll be powerful and helpful if church can open the door and say, "Hey, we want to hear about Isaac's mission. Next year will be 20th anniversary. You've been around, and we've never heard of you and your mission." So this podcast, we have more than 7,500 downloads. So yeah, it's growing.
I
great.
told all my colleagues to subscribe.
Subscribe on YouTube. We are trying to reach 1,000 subscribers to get some kickback. It costs money and resource, to run this program. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm just deeply appreciative. Cris, you have any other question?
Yeah, I was just going to end with one more question. I feel like you've addressed some of it already, but one of the things that I and some of my Asian American friends complain about, I guess is the right word, is how sometimes we feel invisible or unheard. And I feel very heard at Highway. I feel very
Mm-hmm.
heard on the team.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's not always the case for other people and maybe for myself in other contexts. But um, can you maybe describe a little bit how you have created this safe space for me and maybe for Julie, who's also Asian American, that we have a space on our team where our I feel valued, I feel heard and respected in all my particularities as an Asian American. So can you maybe describe how does that work in your head and then in the actions that you take to create that safe space, whether it's just for the team or people in our congregation as well?
Well, thank you for saying that. I honestly feel like I have a lot to learn in this regard. I think there can be a tendency, I think for me to just breeze past, especially people that are very quiet and accommodating. So I still have a lot to learn, but thank you for saying that. I think a big piece of it, and Chris, you know a lot of my background, but I think a big piece of it is just trying our best. And again, I have a lot to learn in this, but like making sure these voices are at the right tables and the right tiers. And so, previous church again, there there's plenty of diversity, and maybe there was an openness for people to speak into stuff. But what I observed, especially sort of the end of my tenure there, is like then I would get to the next level of tiers or tables, and when I got to our campus pastor tier, the door would close. It was a group of white males as campus pastors, at the time, and so it was like, well, and then these decisions, like, yeah, we might have heard from other people, but now the decision is being made by a totally different set of voices. So my hope, again, I have a lot to learn here. My hope is that we can be flat enough in our system of management at Highway where anybody can enter into that table or that tier. And I think a big piece of that is our board of directors. We have been pretty intentional about who is at that table. And I think we need to make sure we're continuing to do that. Of like, there are different voices constantly there. So it's when we get to that group, everybody can speak into it. So I think that's what I'd say, but I have a lot to learn. I do think just trying to go full circle a little bit. I think there's a level of like the full, you said this earlier, Young, of like the full body of church. And it sounds a little cliche or cheesy to say, but it's like we have to keep trying to understand the full body of Christ is not the full body of Christ unless we are receiving voices of color constantly. It's just not, that's not the full picture of who Jesus is, who God is, what the kingdom is. And so, I think that's our burden as pastors is we have to be a little more intentional about that.
I really appreciate your ministry and your church. I'm glad you exist. And I want to really replicate your church and everywhere. I hope you have many more satellite churches, even down in Southern Cal. That would be great. Then you can become a bishop.
Bishop Hendricks, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say we could send Chris down there, but I don't want Chris to leave, so never mind.
So
He's trying to get rid of me already.
multiply. And we don't want exclusive church to multiply. We want inclusive churches to multiply. I just want to highlight the fact that when you empower women as a male pastor, then you become healthier and wholesome and more attractive. It's not just benefiting women, it is for both men and women. And getting along and working together, just like Esther and Mordecai at the palace. And so we are not trying to replace male leadership with women's leadership. We want to work together so that church becomes fuller body of Christ. So, and we're also highlighting the fact that, supporting Isaac's mission is also mission. You don't have to always go across the ocean. I'm not against mission overseas, but America is mission field. So acknowledging the need here, and it's your sisters, mothers, and grandmas that you'll be investing in for the sake of larger body of Christ and God's reign. So I just want to give one, commercial piece that we would love all of you out there, listeners, to join us in May in celebrating AAPI Heritage Month. What better way to mark that month to honor Asian American women faith leaders by investing in your lunch money or cup of coffee. And we are looking for 50 monthly donors. $5 is fine, $10 is fine. And it would help us continue and sustain the program that we created because it didn't exist. So we are deeply grateful for Lilly Endowment and their matching every dollar you invest on AAPI community and faith leaders. So it's called May for Her in celebrating AAPI Heritage Month. So that would help us to continue our program.
Any last thoughts or words before we sign off?
I'm super grateful to be here, and I'm super grateful that you would consider me an ally. That's would be what I aspire to be. I think I would still need a lot to learn and grow, and I'm just honored with what you all are doing.
Adam, it's your action, not just your words, that we see you as an ally. Because there are many talkers out there who doesn't deliver their talk, but you do. So we are excited to have you as the first white male ally pastor, and hope to do that more. And thank you for taking your busy time today after Easter, and may God bless you and your ministry and your beautiful family. And I'm Korean American, married to Minnesotan.
So yes, you know the unique combination there.
Of course.
Yep. Well, I know we're wrapping up, but I should say one of Nuri and my favorite things to talk about is comparing our different comfort meals. His Korean mom's comfort meals versus my Oklahoma mom's comfort meals, and we actually love each other's food, so it's always fun for us to talk about.
I know about the okra, but I think that's it.
Yeah, a lot of fried okra. Nuri talks about his mom did kimchi spaghetti, and when he first told me that, I was like, "What?"
Wow!
And then I tried it, and it was delicious. It was delicious.
Yeah, we are spicy.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Oh,
very spicy.
So pleasure meeting you, and I hope you get some rest and recharge. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for
Chris,
joining
for
us.
inviting. Yeah.
Great to meet you, Young. Thank you, Chris.
Good to meet
Thank
you.
all.